Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Community Services Committee meeting for March 29, 2018. And to the residents, our apology for moving it to the afternoon, but if we had had the meeting at 9:30 this morning, it would have been cancelled because 4 of the 6 members were at the funeral for Roger Anderson. So I'm Councillor Bob Chapman. I'm the chair of the committee, and our members are Vice Chair is Councillor John Neal, members Councillor Rick Kerr, Councillor Nestor Pidverbecki, Councillor John Shields, and of course our Mayor John Henry is ex officio to all committees. Visiting councillors, we have Councillor Dan Carter, Councillor Gail Bates, Councillor Doug Sanders, and Councillor Amy McQuaid-England. On my left is the most important person in the room, Laura Davis, who's from the clerk's office, who keeps us on the straight and narrow and does all the recordings. And I will ask Commissioner Ron Diskey if you could introduce staff, please, Commissioner.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Chapman. With us today is the Executive Director of HR, Visha Sadeo, Acting Director of Recreation and Culture, Jim Namoski, Director of Strategic and Business Services, Beth Mullen, our Finance Director and Treasurer, Stephanie Sinnott, Fire Chief, Derek Clark. I'm going to have to stand to make sure I don't miss anybody. We have Laura Intamasi, Supervisor of Special Events, Catherine Richards, Manager of Culture and Centralized Recreation Services, Pam Killen, Supervisor of Customer Service and Recreation, Mitch Wiskel, Supervisor of Parks Technical, Mike Saulnier, Acting Director of Operations, Stephen Wilcox from the our Manager of the Airport, Kathy Pittman-Feltman, our Supervisor of Animal Services, Drew Chillingworth, Manager of Parks Operations, Mike Sluggett, Manager of Street Lighting, Traffic, and something else. We have Rajit Gill from our Traffic Engineering. I have Deputy Chief Todd Wood, Deputy Chief Steve Barkwell, and I have a huge contingent of fire services staff as well. I think I've got everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. Well done, well done. Just remind everybody in attendance when speaking, please use the microphones as this meeting is recorded in webcast and speak directly into it. Additional agenda items. You have a motion, Councillor Neal, to add them? This one's? Is that the one?
These are delegations. Okay. That the delegations from At.Paul-André Larose, John Vanderhorst, correspondent CS 1828, from various residents in opposition to a proposed trail adjacent to the Oshawa Executive Airport, and correspondent CS 1829 in support of a proposed trail adjacent to the Oshawa Executive Airport, be added to the agenda for the March 29th, 2018 Community Services Committee meeting.
All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Members of committee? Seeing none. No presentations. Delegations. You have a motion, Councillor Neal?
Yes, that the rules of procedure be waived to hear the delegations of At.Julia McCrea, Paul-André Larose, and Diane Rapovsky-Mash, and the Oshawa Professional Firefighters Association in the following order.
And the reason that we're waiving the rules committee is because they normally we do delegations as they're received, but this change is to make sure we hear everything about the trail and then everything about the fire in 2 separate chunks. So all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So we have our first delegate, At.Julia McCrea. Welcome. Can you make sure the microphone's on, and you have 10 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chair Chapman, Councillors, and Mayor Henry. I would like permission that if for some reason my delegation goes a little bit over 10 minutes. I hope you'll understand and perhaps tolerate that. As you know, I communicated with Mayor, Council, and members of this committee about asking you to stop the proposed construction of the paved off-road multi-use pathway that's proposed to run between Jane Street in the south to Taunton Road in the north, squeezed in between the Oshawa Executive Airport and the Oshawa Creek. So, and I made several safety concerns and other security concerns, environmental concerns, and loss of the green space concerns brought those to your attention, asking for you to stop the construction. And I have made an effort to get out to community members in the Glens with a notice about, unfortunately, the meeting that was supposed to be this morning. And have spent quite a bit of time to visit departments in City Hall, to take pictures, to visit CLOCA and get maps, and to try and understand sort of how this project came about and why I still think it's not a great idea to go through. I don't like posing it as the Glens versus the paved pathway, because there are many people in our neighborhood who love the paved pathways that exist, and are cyclists and are runners and love the natural space. But in this situation, that seems like what we're up against. So, as a resident and taxpayer, I'm here today to ask a series of questions about a city project to put a north-south paved pathway from Jane Street in the south to Taunton Road in the north, squeezed between a heavy polluter, the Oshawa Executive Airport, and the environmentally sensitive Oshawa Creek, through a green space that has been a significant part of Oshawa's heritage until now. I am here to ask several questions as to why this space has been suddenly opened for destruction of trees and shrubs and development without any consultation with the neighbours. This shows no respect for the neighbours nor the land. And I'm in shock as of yesterday, as a neighbour, Andrew Van Chat, brought me pictures showing that the destruction of the trees from end to end of the proposed pathway has already taken place. They have clear-cut, they have scarified the land there, proximate to the airport fence line. What's left is mud and some piles of wood chips that haven't already been removed. So the trees were stripped and chipped, and the remaining trees show damage from the work that's been done. So I guess Andrew Van Chat, I thought he might be here with his photographs, but my request is we need an immediate meeting with the residents and citizens of the Glens and other parts of Oshawa that's planned and advertised with door-to-door notice as a public consultation on this project. I'd also request that we have replanting of the tree stock in the areas around the airport fence line where there have been unnecessary removals with species that can address both pollution, noise, and of a size that will have an immediate impact. And also my request is answers to the following questions. So who authorized this? This week I have sought the paper trail that to find committee or council approval of this project. I can't find it. Clerk's office couldn't find it. All they could find was a Development Services report from 2015 that approved the broad-scale active transit master plan. Nothing specific to this project. There's no budget record specific to this project in the last 3 years' budgets. There may be general stuff that talks about active transit master plan, but the one that is in the budget for this year is very specifically labeled. It's a trail from Uoit down to Taunton. There's nothing about this particular. So where was the financial authorization given for any work on this? And there was no public consultation. Now, I've talked to Rondiski this morning. They think the public consultations that they held generally about the active transit master plan at the Civic last year would cover this. No, if it's a general about all the trails, we wouldn't know what's happening in our backyard, that's proposed to go ahead. So that really wasn't public consultation. And the meeting that was held at the airport, that was about the airport. And there was about 1 minute or two that the person from Parks may have got up and said something about the trail, but most people, he sat down. The questions were not about that. People were there for the airport. So that was not a public consultation about this pathway, from my opinion. Maybe different. So Who authorized this? I'm told that Steve Wilcox, the airport manager, said the trees have to be removed. Well, I'm going to contest that. Tree removal was not part of the runway rehabilitation project approved by council. That's in the budgeted amounts. It says nothing about tree removal. It doesn't say anything about the new fence line either. And all tree removal is not required by Transport Canada regulation. I have the regulation here, and I have copies of what it says about natural growth, which is what they mean by trees. And what it indicates is, and the regulation's been the same since 1985, and there's been no mass cuttings of trees up there. But last year and this, the destruction of the trees proximate to the airport has been phenomenal. There's a 7-meter wide swath along the back properties of Jane Street residents on the south side of the airport, and now we've got who knows how wide the swath is that they've cut up there. I can't tell exactly from the pictures, but I would say 10 meters or more. It's supposed to be a 3-meter paved pathway. That's excessive. And it shouldn't have really been done because nobody's authorized the work that I can see. So our neighborhood and the rest of Oshawa has lost protection from the airport noise, its winds, and the pollution. This needs to be mitigated and, I hate to say it, perhaps litigated so people understand what a travesty this is. As a resident of Oshawa, I count on this green space to protect my health and that of other residents by producing oxygen, by anchoring the soil from erosion, by providing an essential buffer from the noise, air pollution, and winds and erosion off the airport, as well as providing natural beauty and natural heritage to the neighborhood. Most of the people in this neighborhood reside there because of its natural beauty, the trees, the parks, the green spaces, as well as good schools. The natural heritage of trees has now been severely challenged not only by natural hazards like the ice storm we had a few years ago, emerald ash borer, and we understand that the ash borer had to come out, but on the south side of the airport they clear-cut way more than the ash borer. They took down maple, birch, and all kinds of things last year. That's ridiculous. The problem of human impact has dramatically increased in the last years. The airport staff seemed to undertake actions to remove trees in excess of what was approved by that runway rehabilitation plan that you did approve. That was for repaving of the runways and construction of the noise berm. That wasn't for holus-bolus tree cutting. So I have maps here from CLOCA showing the environmentally significant areas and the current edge of the tableland above the Oshawa Creek, and maps from the Planning and Engineering Department showing the zoning, aerial photographs, and storm sewers for the drainage of the area. I've also brought photographs I've taken of the extensive erosion damage around the outflow of the south storm drain that empties the Oshawa Executive Airport, that's cutting down the slope to the Oshawa Creek, and in the west part of Somerset Park, and also to show the erosion damage on the west bank of the Oshawa Creek from high water meanders. So I'm just going to point those out. Here's the first storm drain that runs out of the south part of the airport here.
You just keep the microphone.
Yeah,
thank
in
you.
South part of the airport here, there's I forget what sort of an outflow here, and then it just runs down the slope. The water runs down the slope. This shows, it may not show as clearly as I'd like, but the water coming off the airport was so excessive this year, it has cut a whole new erosion pathway down that slope that wasn't there before. On the other side, I went over to, and I found out, I didn't realize that Somerset Park extends to our side of the creek. But I went to Somerset Park to take pictures of the erosion on the other side that you can see from our side at the top of the cliffs. But the top of the cliff along the slope has become hazardous to go because it's so severely undercut. So take this with me. This is a huge meander that you can see on most of the maps here that is cutting into the airport lands. I spoke to the city engineer a couple of years ago because when they're talking about repaving, this is eroding badly in, and you can see the damage there. There's also, this is along the west side, looking at the west side of the creek, and you can see the high waters are undercutting the slope there, which is making that an erosion hazard. This looks north up the creek. You can see how beautiful it is, but that's also floodplain lands there. And here, this is looking south down the creek and showing a fairly large area of floodplain.
You have 1 minute left, Ms.
Okay.
McCrea.
Okay.
Motion. Hold on 1 minute, please. Motion to extend for the 2 minutes. All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Okay, so now you have 3 minutes.
So from this, thanks, Amy. From this side, what you're seeing here is aerial photographs from Cloca showing the area. So you'll see that the natural creek, the Oshawa Creek, and the green space has not changed. In fact, looks like it has grown through time. It's a little smaller on this one through here. And this is Cloca's map showing the red line is the slope. It shows two locally significant wetlands. This one has pretty much been destroyed by the berm that's gone through here. And the provincially significant wetland that is mostly on the east side of the creek. What I want to point out here is just basically what we're looking at so far is destruction of the historical natural heritage, the health protection for people in the neighborhood, the buffer for noise pollution, air pollution. It's going to property value. It's intermittent. And this. And
It's on. It's on.
sorry. Okay. And there's going to be there needs to be mitigation costs. What many of the neighbors have told me as I've gone to visit is they're concerned about security, policing, costs, increase of vandalism and crime. We put in a Freedom of Information request to the police for information on our current crime statistics in our neighborhood, but we have been told about the crime statistics on other paved pathways in the more central and southern parts of Oshawa. So there's safety hazards. For fire calls and ambulance, we have several firefighters who live in our neighborhood who have talked about the calls they get for the southern creek pathways, and we know that that's historically a pit party area for McLaughlin and Dwyer students. That could increase. There's going to be maintenance costs associated with this. There's going to be increased garbage. This is an area fraught with the hazards I've already told you for municipal liability. So question, who authorized this? There's no paper trail. The preliminary project plans, which came to us at the Oshawa Accessibility Advisory Committee a week ago, March 20th, are just that. They're preliminary plans, and they haven't even passed through our committee, and I don't know how many other committees. So how could they begin this project without having those authorizations in an approved plan? I find that hard to believe. So that's I'm going to.
You'll have to sum up now.
Okay, so I guess my questions about the clear cutting, the lack of authorization, the lack of financial approval, what environmental assessment was done on this project, and what were the results of the one that was submitted for the Active Transit Master Plan, the lack of council approval, the lack of project financing by council, the lack of notice to surrounding residents, where's the permit from Cloca, where's the safe setback from the creek slope, where's the safe setback from Oshawa Creek meanders, where's the safety planning, where's the protection of the natural heritage that's required by the Oshawa official plan. There's several parts of the Oshawa official plan that have just been totally neglected in terms of walking and cycling facilities, heritage properties.
You have to finish up now, Ms. McCrea. Sorry.
Okay. So I've left my presentation, the complete presentation with the clerk and copies for you. So I really hope that you will take some action to put a stop to what's happened, to sanction the staff that moved without permission, and to get us more answers to the questions and to hold that meeting we've asked for. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There might be some questions. Questions from committee members? No? Visiting councillors? Councillor Carter?
First of all, good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Ms. McCrea. Thank you very much for your presentation. And thank you for the collection of work that you've put into this. So at this particular time, is the community, the surrounding community, do they visit the creek at this time?
Yeah, despite the construction fences that are up, people do go.
Like they go where along the creek, do they visit that area right now?
Yes. So
Do people walk their dogs in that area?
Yep.
Okay. Have you heard at this time about some of their concerns about how they don't feel safe at this time walking in that area, or about the safety of when they take their dog in that area?
No, the safety concerns I've heard from the residents who wrote to me, and I assume may have written to council, are in regards to sort of past history.
Okay.
So there's several people who've lived there for well over 40 years, and recall like 15 years ago when the gangs would walk up Glencairn, take people's chairs out of their backyards towards the pit parties, take wood, jump in people's pools, and basically it was a policing problem until they got them out of there.
But from your door knocking, it sounds, from the literature that you're sharing with us and the information you're sharing with us, it sounds like there are people that are very concerned, like the security concerns are quite serious in this area. That's what I'm getting from the correspondence that you got from knocking on the doors.
Yeah, I got that from, good
So
two or three
would it be
people.
more advisable just to fence that area so no one could enter that area to make sure? And matter of fact, because that area also will continue to go north to the university, should we fence that whole area so that area we cannot access it to make sure that people are safe?
That's a tough question.
Yeah.
Because I think people, they want access to that natural, beautiful space, you know, by the creek, but there are a number of significant hazards in there.
Okay. I don't know, were you aware that there was a discussion at the public meeting on December the 5th, I think it is, at the airport public meeting? Were you aware that this discussion, that there was a presentation not only about the trees, but there was also a discussion about the Southfield master plan and also the trail? Were you aware that that conversation went on at that public meeting?
I was there for the latter half of that meeting, but I understood that there was the trail was at least announced in some way, shape, or form that it was part of the plan.
We felt bad for our staff that night because they did come with full plans and were asked to sit down, and the crowd said that they did not want to know anything about the trail, didn't want to know anything about the trees that were moved, and didn't want to know anything about the Southfield. So unfortunately, that conversation didn't happen. I felt bad for our arborist because he came well prepared to answer all the questions about the concerns that community had, and I think it was a missed opportunity. Were you aware that there was a discussion that happened with this trail I believe it was at the Civic Auditorium about our active transportation plans and networks? I believe it was about a year ago. I'm trying to recall the exact dating, but I think it was about a year ago.
Well, that's a long time ago. I wasn't aware of that one, and to my understanding, that was general about like all the trails in the city. That wouldn't necessarily attract people in our neighborhood. Whereas if it's a good neighbor, if you're developing something, you usually have to let people know in the immediate surroundings and give them a notice period and a time to comment, and that hasn't happened.
Okay. I know that there was, and I'm not really sure. I can hear a discussion going on, so I might be able to get exactly. Okay, we're going to get you the exact date. You had said that you had trouble finding this allocation of money or description of this particular project when you called, right?
I went through 3 years of budget data that's on the website, and there's nothing specific to this project the way there is for the 2018 specific trail. It actually says where it's going. So if this is buried in some active transit master plan sort of general fund, it isn't specific. So how would anybody in the community know that it's going to happen in their backyard?
Okay. So I just want to refer, Mr. Chair, I have a document here that is, to my knowledge, is available to the public. It is part of our budget process. Project name is ATMP, Oshawa Creek Trail Development. This is under the City of Oshawa Capital Projects detailed sheet. I can make sure that you get a copy of this. This is for the 2017 budget presentation that happened. It says project description. This project involves the design, engineering, installation of a pedestrian structure and 1.5 trail connection from Somerset Park to the future citywide trail system proposed throughout the Oshawa Creek Valley corridor. Trail development in this location is recommended in the Cycling Network Study, Draft City Trails Master Plan, and achieves goals identified in the Parks, Recreation, Culture, and Strategy, which is our PRLC document. This project includes the installation of a 3-meter wide asphalt trails, signage, and landscaping planting. Under that description, it also shows the financing, the growth-related non-DCs in 2017, where it is summarized, and also the Park Rec Trails development of 2014 allocation funds. So that document again is project number 50-0009, and I can make sure you get a copy of that. So this is a public document, and I wanted to read it to you because I'm under the assumption that you weren't aware that this document existed.
Well, it's not available through the website. That's the specificity of that particular, as you said, detailed, was not what you can find on the general website that people might be looking for. So that's not how, well, I mean, it's good to know that there was some financial oversight, but but it's problematic for anybody else to know that.
So because you live in the area, I'm going to ask you, specifically you had said the work has already started on the trail. Is that what you understand?
That's what I saw photographic evidence of yesterday.
Okay,
Somebody
so
who went from the north to the south.
Yes.
And I guess my concern with that is the zoning for this area. The blue line is for airport. So
Yes.
the airport only has up to here, that big meander in. The rest of the land that's here is OSH, which means open space hazard. It's not airport lands. They don't have purview to be cutting outside of there. There's no, they don't have control. So how would they, you know, what I heard today was they just, holus bolus went, they have control over these lands, which are, some of which are outside the airport fence. So, and then you've got parkland. So
Okay.
I don't know where they...
Okay,
you know,
I'll try and get you some answers in regards to who has the
wild.
authority in that area, because I was under the impression it was under the authority of the airport. And I think from our arborist that did try to do his presentation on December the 5th, he wanted to explain the reason for the removal of the trees, because we had heard personally through our door knocking is people were concerned about the trees and why they were removed, and they wanted a proper professional explanation outside of Mr. Wilcox, and that was the reason why the arborist was at that meeting, to answer those questions. So maybe we can get those answers for you. Again, as I appreciate the work that you've put into it, I know that we have some correspondence also that is in favor of it, but I appreciate the work that you've put into it, and thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Councillor McQueen-Dingler.
Mr. Chair, I'm just looking for some direction from you. I do have some questions of staff based on...
That'll come up after delegation.
Okay.
Any other questions to the delegate? Councillor Sanders? Sorry, didn't see you.
Sorry. Councillor Carter asked some of my questions. In regards to the pictures that we're just taking from the trees that have been removed, is it recently you just became aware, or just through the pictures you're aware that they started cutting these trees, or they've been down for weeks? Or
I went as far as that storm drain about 2 weeks ago, but I didn't, you know, go further, so I wouldn't have seen what our other neighbors saw. So he was in, like, I guess that would be 2 days ago, and took pictures down the route. So.
Okay, my other question is, because you live in the neighborhood, and I don't know if you're aware, do you know whether because you talk about the erosion of the bank, does the airport push their snow wall over to that side, or do you know?
I don't know, but there is hydrology problems because and you can see all the storm drains off the airport because it's that big open space between two creeks. It's like, It's at the peak of water flow. So there's a ton of storm drains up there. And this area here that was designated a locally significant wetland also caused some, it causes extra water flow. But because of the berm there, I'm suspecting the huge erosion we're seeing here is because of the new berm, which is basically here. And so anything running off that is going to go down to the creek here because it's all slanted. You know, basically it's going to be running that way down to the creek and then sort of the elevation from the airport down to the lake, right? So that's what's forcing all that water out there. So it's
okay. I just wanted to know
that's
what
an engineering
yes.
problem of how you're going to how that's going to get addressed. And so, I mean, we didn't have, I don't know whether we had significant extra snowfall that would cause for that extra water, but, you know, significant storm events or meltwater is going to just, you know.
But this would have been the
that
first
stuff
winter
raise-
with the berm also, right?
Yes, that's
Okay.
right.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Carter.
Mr. Chair, I was just notified that that meeting at the Civic was May the 30th, 2017, just for record.
30th
Of May.
May.
Thank you. What did
Thank
I
you.
say? September?
You just said it was made the 30th of 2017. I figured there was more months with 30 days in them than just one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any others? Thank you, Ms. McCrea. Mr. Larose. Saw him here. He has a presentation? Okay. It's all set to go. Welcome, Mr. Larose. I understand you have a presentation, so we'll be turning down the lights. Councillor Neal, can you get the lights? And you're ready to go. You have 10 minutes, sir.
Thank you to Chair and
Oh, your microphone's off. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Testing. Okay. Here we are. Okay, sorry about that. By the way, if you have problems, you hear me. I got a little problem with my throat. So, no, thank you kindly. I've been there's been a long hiatus for me as being making delegations and so on and so forth. And when I saw this particular issue, and since it's related, it related quite strongly to something that I had been very active on and still am active in a way, many years ago, I decided that I would intervene and make a delegation to at least clarify some of the facts. Because I think that there's a lot of misconceptions that are circulating around here. Now, do I press that down? Sorry, how do I change it? You show me here. Oh, the arrow. The arrow. Okay. Thank you kindly. Okay, this being said, I decided to intervene here, and I want to make it clear from the beginning, and let there be no doubt, that it is not, as far as I'm concerned, a NIMBY issue. It's not because I live very close by that I intervene. I think it's a question of seeing the greater good here. Point number two is that I'm a strong supporter of the airport. And the airport can be a catalyst for economic issues in the area. Think, for example, of Buttonville, for example, all the high-tech firms that are gravitating around the airport. So it could be a catalyst. I mentioned that in passing because I don't want the rest of my presentation to be misinterpreted. And the third point that I think is important to remember is that there's more than capital costs whenever one does something. There's an ongoing maintenance cost. Now, we may decide to ignore that cost, and then we end up with something that is less than desirable. Call it delinquent landlord type of attitude. An example of that, don't take my word for it, just go South Oshawa Trail, for example. It's absolutely, if I was to maintain my property the way the city maintains the adjacent areas and so on and so forth, I'm not even talking about the hazard of the so-called multi-use trail here. But if I was to maintain my property the same way, there would be bylaw officer knocking at my door to clean up the place. This is disgusting, and we have to recognize that whatever we do there is going to be requiring maintenance issue. So it's not something that's immune to the area. So I will, as I said, I was not planning, but when I saw that, I want to make these points clear, that this undertaking is very undesirable. And I keep hearing the word active transportation. It's not active transportation. Give me a break. This is recreational cycling. There's a big difference between active transportation and I'm not going to take time in my delegation to address these issues, but I had done the attributes before. I can talk about this later on if a question arises. But what are we talking about here? This thing is really going to create a problem, not a solution. It contains irrevocable flaws, and it misses some of the essential attributes if we really want to aim for active transportation. As I say, it is recreational. And I can bet you it's not going to be 24/7, and it's not going to be in the winter, and so on and so forth. So it's not transportation. Meanwhile, the real needs are not being addressed, and some of these needs could be addressed in very low-cost fashion. Now, having at this point, because I learned, like the previous speaker said, I learned about this just yesterday about the thing. The rest of my delegation is going to be different from what I had intended to do. And since you require 24 hours to send it, I did not send it. But I will ask you to bear with me, and try to take good mental notes here. My original intent in coming here was to have an intelligent discussion on the issue. It's not a question of build the trails and they will come and so on and so forth. I can look at many examples, whether Gibbons Road or areas like this here, where in 3 years I've been observing since the work was done, I've seen only one cyclist on it. So, because of the situation that came to my attention, I felt it was a game changer. And I feel that we are facing a situation that I would call a scorched earth approach here. In other words, we do the things, and then it's too late to back out. We reach a point of no return. So it is very difficult to do planning at the same time as the bulldozers are in the field. And we're in a situation like this. And sometimes I wonder what I'm doing here to address that issue here, because I feel there's been some bullying in this decision-making process here, that things were not done properly. We are addressing an issue that should be well thought of. It's not something that we just build and suddenly it resolves our greenhouse emission problem in the area here. It's much bigger than that. But we have to think about it. So consequently, I did an amendment to my delegation here. I call that particular venture or undertaking, I call that a pending disaster. I see that as a repeat of the Collins miniature debacle. And it's not something to be proud of. You know, when somebody says Oshawa proud, I wish they could explain to me what it means, but that's another story. It will not do one iota to promote active transportation. Okay? I bet you anybody who's going to vote for this, I'm not going to see them every day of the week going to work on this area, on this trail. It has missing attributes, very important, again, which I can talk about later on. And It is a recreational rather than functional. So recreational means you go when the weather is nice. You go on weekends. You go when you want to have time with the kids and so on and so forth. You don't go there like personally, when I was addressing one of this aspect, which was functional transportation, I used the bike to go from home to the bank, to the library, city hall, and back home. That's functional. See, I'll just mention that verbally. I have a slide later on in the reference section if needs arise. But recreational cycling, I call it going from nowhere to nowhere. You go along the Lakeshore Trail, doesn't matter where you go, just when you come back with a GO train for the race. Functional cycling, I call it going from somewhere to somewhere. I have a purpose. I leave 1 ton of steel at home when I take my bicycle to go in these things. That's contributing to the greenhouse reduction. So why this mad rush for this thing here? I mean, have we been running the airport illegally for all these years since the war times? I mean, we talk about noble ideas, and when it comes to walk the talk, we just can't be consistent. I can tell you from experience, in the case of certain railways, I'll do an analogy, that abandoned railways that are converted to trails. It's called from rail to trail. Many of the adjacent homeowners are regretful. They wish they could have the trains again because the trail now is an invitation to people that are not the best, the cream of society, let's put it this way, that they do vandalism on their property and so on and so forth like this, issues like that. Not the cream of society. So this is what it attracts. Now, again, I can talk in the attributes later on about some very important issue. All I can say, for example, in a case of a medical issue, if somebody has a heart attack in between Taunton and Jane, we're not going to find him until the next day. Does that make any sense? A bikeway or a part of the corridor should be in an area that's frequently used. People can come to the rescue, help, whatever it is. People can be mugged. There was a case in the South Oshawa Trail, for example. There was somebody that was killed there. You know, his name was Sean. There's a monument to him still. So why, again, was this done? Is this part of a bullying tactic? Are there some rogue elements within staff or contractors that want to put us in front of a fait accompli, that the point of no return is reached? I would argue that I'm a taxpayer, you're taxpayers, we're all taxpayers, and I don't, last time I checked, Oshawa wasn't exactly loaded with cash.
You have 1 minute left, Mr. Larose.
Thank you, Conley.
Motion to extend by Councillor Neal. All in favor?
I'm just about
Opposed?
done there, but
Carried.
unless there's question about my other specifics.
Questions don't count time.
Okay, okay. All I'm saying is that here, squandering money that we do not have on issues that we do not need is totally irresponsible. And don't get me wrong again, because I said, let there be no misunderstanding. I'm all for active transportation. But I'm not for just spending money for the sake of doing something. This is like a make you feel good type of things here. We say we spend money, we've done something. Oh, we painted a white line, so no. You can be within the white line. You can still be right, but you can be dead right, and you could still be dead. You know, a white line does not protect a cyclist. This is an example again of feel good. We give the impression that we're doing something by doing the wrong thing. If you want to, as I say, verify more personally what I've just said here, I was there just yesterday on the Oshawa Trail south side, and it's absolutely disgusting. The filth, the graffiti on the piers and everything and so on, and everywhere. And I will end up by quoting Professor Dr. Tom Sowell. Professor Sowell says, Nothing could be more stupid than having people make decisions for which they pay no price and being wrong. Thank you. If there's any questions, I'll be available to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. You put the lights back on, please. Councillor Neal?
Yeah, I guess my question is through you, Mr. Chair, to Paul-André Larose. Like you saying the trails are, trails that you use are not being maintained? Like is this garbage, or are there other issues that you see?
You're talking about the Oshawa Trail?
Yeah.
The South Oshawa Trail?
Yeah. Or, yeah, any
well,
other
I can tell you as of
like
yesterday...
what else are you seeing beside garbage that you don't...
Listen, there's the issue of what I call litter, and I know that it costs money to try to make up for the lack of civility of people who contribute to the problem. There's also the built-in hazard. There's the new fad right now about multi-use trails, which I'm dead against. In the same way that we don't mix pedestrians with cars, we don't mix pedestrians with cyclists, especially motorized cyclists. Again, it happened to me yesterday, and that's one of the reason I don't use the Oshawa Trail as much as I used to. I'm walking there, and people come zooming by from behind. You don't hear them. So, I didn't have my camera yesterday, unfortunately. Okay, but take my word for it, you can go. I'm sure the field is going to be there forever. It's not going to be picked up. Go near the Midtown Mall and go and see what I'm talking about.
Thank you. Any other questions, committee? Councillor Bates?
Thank you, Chair Chapman, and thank you, Mr. Larose. If it's not active transportation and it's just for recreation, is there a reason why we shouldn't have outdoor recreation?
No, I'm not against outdoor recreation, but I just say let's call it. But it has, if it is something that doesn't meet the attributes that I referred to before concerning active transportation, then it's not active transportation.
Okay, then let's call them recreational trails.
Recreational trail, but it's a...
Would that make it all right if you changed the name to recreational?
No, because we still have to pay a lot of money for the few users that are going to be using it.
Our city has been really good about promoting recreation and activity among its citizenry. Do you not think that the trails are a way of doing that? They're walking trails, they're biking trails. I understand what you mean, that some people are rude when they bike through and don't ring a bell or do whatever. But we need to have that outdoor, the parks and recreation and the trail systems available so people can enjoy the outdoors.
Okay, if I may clarify that, again, I'm referring to things that I have written way back. We can use as much as possible the existing facilities. For example, just briefly, I use Nippigan Street to go downtown, okay? This is a street. We don't have to spend any more money except putting a little sign like a neighborhood watch sign that says it's part of the network that allows us, that relates to this, to this whole mesh of cycling facilities. As I say, we can go from A to B without bringing with us a ton of steel. That's one way. We don't have to build a trail that's in isolation. I defy anybody in this room to go and use the Oshawa Trail, the existing one, at night when it's dark. Are we going to say now we have to have lighting? No.
I usually go out in the daylight when I'm doing my recreation.
No, but that's what...
But why couldn't we have that trail available in the north for other people? Maybe there are students who would like to ride from there to their home or to their workplace.
Exactly. That's very true. That's the very point. It's at the wrong place. There's already Somerville that is meeting the need to go to UOIT. I cannot think of anybody, unless a masochist, who would go down from UOIT, go down on Taunton, go down that road, and then have difficulty crossing Roslyn Road in that area. Somerville is all made up.
I understand what you're saying, but you're sort of, are you hoping that people will take the roads instead of the trails? to go from point A to point B.
Well, there's a lot of advantage, but a road, again, is not a white line that will ensure personal safety. That's why again, I'm trying to summarize a lot of things here in a little time. But I was talking about bikeways. Bikeways is a physical separation where risk factors warrant that will separate the cyclist from the vehicle. A white line doesn't do that. So,
No, it doesn't.
no, as I say, you could be dead right on the right side of the white line, but you could still be dead if you're hit. You know.
One last question. You mentioned that the cream of society wouldn't use that trail. So do you think that only certain people should be allowed to use that area?
No, I'm not being elitist in that. I'm just thinking reality, and I got tangible personal evidence of that. It takes a group of people to build a community. It takes one to wreck a neighborhood.
So only certain people should use
No,
that
but
trail.
the point is we should not make it inviting for people who have self-destruct instinct to propagate their, to influence the environment.
Thank you.
Councillor Carter?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Larose, thank you very much for your delegation. Greatly appreciate it. I just want to get a clarification. I know you're a cyclist, and I know that you're quite active. But you're not a fan of the multi-transportation pathways. Is that what you've stated several times? I just want to make sure I understand that.
You understand that correctly. And unfortunately, let me clarify that a little bit. In theory, it's like economies of scale. It makes a lot of sense. But like I said to you, Councillor, when we were developing a proposal for that, is that legislation cannot instill common sense in people. It cannot instill civility. And personally, I have a rule. When I see a pedestrian, especially if I come from behind, I slow down.
Yeah, yeah.
I said to, remember, Councillor, we were talking about my 1 meter rule. For example, I go 1 meter away from the person, even if I have to go on the grass. But nobody does that. So, it's the whole issue is that without education and without enforcement, a law is powerless.
Okay, so you're not in support of the multi-transportation pathways, such as, I know that they go along Taunton, that cyclists use all the time. So you're not in favor of those. You would rather an on-road cycling path
No, not
that
on
is
road,
separated?
sir. Not on road, sir. But I would maintain the same distance, the width, I should say, the same width, for example, but with markers. It's like, for example, if you're at the YMCA. If you're a slow runner, you go in one lap, you go and things like that. So the point is, right now we mix everything. We tend to mix everything.
Right.
Pedestrians should be in a confined area.
Right.
And on the other side, and I've seen that in a few cases come to my mind here, but you could just have a double white line that separates, and on this side, it's the cyclists, and then they can do what they want.
Okay. I'm a fan of the multi-transportation pathways because I'm a runner, and I love, matter of fact, I love Purple Woods. I love going through the forest. I love going up near the airport to run, and what I'm hearing from the delegations today is that option shouldn't be available for people to visit in that area. That's what the concern is, because of erosion, because of pollution, because of garbage, because of security, all those kind of things. That area should be off limits to people to utilize.
An area that's isolated from the rest of of society is a trap that will attract certain
people like me running.
Well, when you're running, you're not doing any harm, but there are people who do other things than running. Let's put it this way. So, it's a question of setting the stage for inviting a problem as opposed to avoiding a problem.
I appreciate your delegation, and I know our community cleanup day that we do at Midtown Mall, Councillor Chapman and myself usually get that pocket. You're more than welcome to join us on that day, and it's a community cleanup. We go along all the trails, we go through the creek beds, we pick up all the garbage through that, and we invite all the community. So I invite you to be a part of that. So
and the question is, did you know it's on
the 25th? Yes. Did you know it's on the 25th? That's why you're the chair.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Larose. Diane Rapkowski-Mash, did I say that right?